Hey, 20 millimeter RPG. Today I'm not going to be talking about Megadungeon 23. Everybody else is talking about it. I'm going to give you some good advice about Mega Dungeons in general. Um for us to get kind of an idea of some of the concepts behind what I think makes a good Mega Dungeon is some of my own personal um, gameplay as a player through some of the material that's out there. The best one out there right now is, well, I would go with, G1 to 3, D1 to 3, and Queen of the Demon Web Pits as being a pretty darn good Mega Dungeon. You can play that out in all kinds of different ways and facets. Um, but what you want to do is you want to take some pointers out of that series of dungeons and do something cool like that. Now, for those who have never played the series of modules before, um, kind of give you an idea of it's basically three sets of modules based around the giants. End up fighting, the hill giants, discover a little bit of information, go on to the frost giants, which were causing troubles as well, get a little bit more information. And by the time you reach the fire giants, you're going to find out a lot more information. The drow is behind the whole thing. So, and who they are following. And depending on who you talk to, it's one of either two gods. But it's entirely up to the game master how to portray all that kind of stuff. And what I want to get into talking about is taking some of the pointers out of that. And out of my personal experience as a player in that, not as a game master, but as a player, what I liked about it. And one of the things is, as you see in the background here, I've got got what you're looking at over here on a separate little tablet. And we're just going to kind of get some ideas down really quickly. I don't want to bore you guys with a ton of weird stuff, getting distracted and everything. But what I want to say is, with a Mega Dungeon, you got to have places that you can kind of take a break from it. That you're not always consistently in a dungeon like a Chinese water torture, hitting you in the forehead over and over again until it makes you go crazy. What you want to do is you want to have little breaks from the dungeon. You want to have the players enter an area where they can kind of sit back, relax, tell their tales, talk to some NPCs, sell their wares that they found in the dungeon, go ahead and trade a few things, that sort of thing. So that's you want to have those kind of little periods in there. So if you kind of look at Undermountain, I guess you have the one kind of pirates city that's under the city of Waterdeep, and that's a good place to go ahead and hawk your wares and make some connections and that sort of thing. In G1 to 3, you don't really have that luxury. I mean, you could go back to town, to the closest town from the mountains and do your ware hawking. But once you've reached the fire giants, which is D3, and you've basically got yourself into going into the descent into the depths of the earth, you're going to end up in a couple of situations where you're not going to be able to trade unless you develop relations with a few of the underground cities there and work out deals and make connections that way. So you got to think that way too. You got to have these places where players can kind of, put up their, you know, put the boots at the door, put up their feet, and relax for a little bit. And, get on with some role play with each other and maybe with some entities within the location, the city that they're in, wherever it is. So there's a lot of spots for that, and that's what you want to go ahead and do in your mega dungeon as well. So a little bit of pre-planning will have to take place where you got to get the general idea. This descent that you're about to embark on, there has to be a reason for it. For instance, the giants were attacking the surrounding areas and collecting stuff and doing things, and that's the reason why there's an urgency to stop these giants. They're just massive creatures, and they're causing a disturbance, and you're being sent to stop them. But of course, there is more for as the players discover more things. You want to have that sort of thing too. So you discover, well, these creatures, they're not the original cause of this problem. They're being pushed out from another band of baddies, and you got to go deal with those too. Otherwise, it's going to be an endless cycle. So what you want to do is kind of pre-plan your dungeon. You want to have some ideas written down. You want to have, like, this is kind of just general. Say you got to figure out what kind of entities you want in there. And for just base BS, we're going to have kobolds. So we're going to have kobolds. We might have some orcs. And you see, I'm just putting them kind of generally in kind of areas here. Well, I have some dwarves, evil dwarves. And maybe we'll have them following some sort of god or goddess. So we'll say god. Yes. Okay, so there's a goddess thing going on here, which the evil dwarves are gravitating towards. The kobolds and orcs are maybe they're having a little bit of a spat between each others, but then we're gonna have some. Oh, let's erase that. Let's have some gnolls, my favorite. And the gnolls are against these guys and against these guys, so they're fighting each other. So there's a bit of a back and forth going towards the evil dwarves and the gnolls, and then the gnolls against the kobolds. But the kobolds and orcs have aligned themselves, so their alliance holds against any of these. So it's just ideas that you want to kind of write down first before you get deep into, like, making an actual dungeon. Now you're gonna have to have some big bosses. Now the orcs don't necessarily have to be ruled by the another orc. It could be an ogre. It could be a minotaur. Could also have some harpies. You're going, harpies? Why would you have harpies underground? They're a flying creature. Well, we're gonna have some, big, massive caves. Like we're talking like wilderness size. Giant mushroom forests, that sort of stuff. You want to have these big, vast underground cavernous areas that are massive, so it gives the illusion that, hey, yeah, these creatures can thrive down here. They're all some of them are collecting stuff from around the area. You've got lots of bug life and stuff like that are living under the ground here. And the gnolls are going to be eating the bugs. The bugs are going to be eating the mushrooms and worms or whatever. And you're going to have this complete ecosystem that's occurring that's kind of semi-believable in a fantasy kind of ironic realm. Um, so you want to have these things massively huge. You want to have, these ecosystems down there that will allow things like that to thrive. And I believe there is a few places like that in Descent where they were like giant, cavernous areas, like the wilderness of the underground, where you can engage in that kind of ideas and have that question kind of answered for the players. How do these creatures live down here? Well, you have your answer. So keep that in mind. You want to have, maybe we'll have a couple of temples, ancient temple. So all these ideas are going to be all part of this underground mega dungeon. So we have gnolls. They're going to be led by, what would be a good idea? For gnolls, who would be like maybe a Flint. Okay, so Flint. Flynn Commander is taking over the gnolls and leading them to do nasty things. Um, and like I say, the dwarves, the goddess, for the evil dwarves, harpies. Like I say, those could be like general nasties in the vast wildernesses in the underground caverns. Bugs, bugs, worms, all kinds of things you can bring up. Centipedes. Forgive me for my chicken scratch. I'm just writing down real fast. It's kind of like what I do. And all these aspects you can go ahead and kind of work around. So with all these ideas here, we'll go ahead and put another layer here. There. We'll go with a different color. And we will start writing. So now with this, I'm going to go ahead and take that layer, and we want to go ahead and bring down the opacity of that, so we can get our idea across here. So for the kobolds, you want to start. They might be the first things that the players encounter. So there's going to be like maybe a mountain region with a bunch of cave entrances, and they're going to have a big cave complex and stuff like that. So, in general, and all I'm doing is just sketching out ideas to get some kind of like cohesive planning going on. So we got these little cave areas that the kobolds are in, and then they will also kind of break into this wilderness area, which is going to be this spot here. So we kind of draw that in. And this is the underground wilderness. So it's a bunch of caves and stuff. So we're going to have a few lakes and stuff like that, and lots of mushrooms growing everywhere. And it's going to be huge. This massive, huge areas underground, that you can't even put on paper because they're so large. You just have to use your graph paper, whatever. Just draw it out kind of simply. Orcs will have more of a. We're going to have the orcs in a more organized area. They're going to be kind of like in an old, ancient underground, what used to be an underground city, and from the ancient days where the humans dug it out and they created an underground society, and then eventually uh, the old ancient times, they finally came out of their underground dwellings and traveled around the surface world because it was safer, and maybe it was a more dangerous time back then. There was dragons scorching the earth or something like that. So now we have like these kind of like strange kind of more blocky kind of areas. Like there, it's an underground city with a few, underground entrances into little labyrinthian kind of, um, sewers and stuff like that that go underground under the city itself. And then we're gonna have maybe an ancient tunnel which leads to this area where there is going to be this ancient um, temple or whatever. And then let's go ahead and add our evil dwarves. With dwarves are going to be, kind of having their own kind of little bit different looking structure of area compared to the ancient humans underground city that used to be here. And you can go ahead and design like massive complexes off of the dwarves, how they would go ahead and keep in mind, when we're talking about um this kind of stuff, let's zoom ourselves in just to give you the sense of area. The area here, you're going to have like little tiny, you know dungeons happening here that are just, going to be little rooms and stuff like that you're going to put a bit of thought in how they're going to be trapped, what kind of utilitarian ideas behind each room is going to be. This is where the storage is. This is going to be, a general feasting area, blah blah blah. So your actual dungeons are going to be like like it's going to be, based on what you've constructed here in the kind of like the rough draft of what you have here. So to get my point across, there's going to be a lot of rooms in each of these areas. So don't think this is just one big area. This is just one big idea for an area. This is going to be like the temple area. This is where the goddess is going to be. This is where they're going to have a temple here, right? And they might have a massive like underground city. So there's going to be a lot of buildings down here, tons of them. There's probably going to be a couple of areas where they step, they're kind of like steps in levels, and do something interesting like that. Like give variety and depth and three dimensionality and stuff in each of your areas. And I'm just saying, do some pre-planning. And that's a little bit more efficient than say Megadungeon 23, which is going on the premise make one room every day. And I can't work that way. Sorry. I have to have this idea because I want what's going to be happening here to be cohesive. Players will understand the politics of what's going on here between the dwarves and the orcs and the kobolds and the gnolls. And there's going to be, players will be, trying to get the gnolls to come onto their side, or the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of idea, and work out deals like that. Maybe they might have to do something like that. Maybe they actually rescue a gnoll that's going to be beaten by a horde of orcs, and then they gain the friendship of the gnolls that way, or something like that. You pop in things like that, little general tidbits of things that players will glom onto and say, "Hey, since we made friends with this gnoll, maybe we should, you know, uh, maybe we should keep them in our back pocket as potential allies here, or something like that." It depends on your players. Depends on how they play. So my advice to everybody out there is basically do something like this, where you've got some ideas, get them down, draw them out, and then work on these individual areas like this one here, and then start working on, what it is, what is in this area, then what is in this area, now what is in this, and then expand that way, start working on each part. But in the meantime, in the background, you already have this idea, even though you've done the area with the gnolls, and you've done the area with the kobolds, say that's your first couple of areas. The rest of it's still in the back of your mind or written on notes, that there's orcs, there's bosses, there's ogres, there's, the Minotaur boss for the orcs. Players may decide, that they're not going to, you know, uh, group together with the gnolls. They're going to go ahead and ally with the orcs or something. Who knows? I don't know. The players all decide that, and that's part of their story. So you're just putting in place all these NPCs, the Minotaur, the ogre, the worms, the harpies, the leader of the harpies. It could be some harpy queen or something like that. Whatever you think, whatever your imagination comes up with that you think might be neat. And you've got all these, background characters, and all you need to do is start detailing out the areas that you currently really need, and do that. You start, right, doing the details of this area here, then you start doing the details of this area in here as well. Get all the information down, draw out your map or whatever it is that you're using, and get those down. But have those ideas still in the back of your head lingering while the players are deciding on how they're gonna, you know do this thing, how they're going to figure out who's in behind everything. So for instance, it'll probably be the goddess and the evil dwarves that are the main baddies here. So and the evil dwarves might have, some giants under their, under their beck and call too, so we can throw in some giants in there as well and make it even more interesting for higher levels. And that's it. Just work on each individual area, you know, as you need them, as you keep on going, as the players keep on exploring. You can have, notes written out. It's the same thing that I do with regional areas above ground. You don't want to get into total, so much information that you're gonna just, your players are just going to zone out after a while. You want the players to learn each tidbit of information by themselves through gameplay, not through exposition. So the players are going to be discovering things in each of these areas. And I mean, you can go ahead and actually detail out now each of the areas as far as like actual maps, on graph paper, if you really wanted to. And you have a framework to start with here, and you're not going to be like deviating off. Like, you could put in a few like little extra wild things in here, like especially in the Harpy Wilderness, there could be like a manticore or something like that, or it could be a dragonelle or something like that. You could even throw in a dragon in here if you really wanted to, but still, the main story is going to be, what the players finding out what's happening here, and gaining treasure, because that's what they want to do, and become famous and rich, and the heroes of all the lands, because they figured out what was going on down there, and they quelled it, or they may think they quelled it, and then later on, when they think that they've taken on the big Minotaur here, big Minotaur bad guy, they think, oh, we've done it, we've stopped, and then suddenly there's an influx of evil dwarves that start taking over some of the caverns and stuff here, and the players weeks later get a message from the Lord saying, "Oh, we have some other issues that are occurring, and we need you to help us stop it." And then, of course, players go back down and discover that these evil dwarves have taken over everything, and it could be They could be gathering sacrifices. Maybe that's what they were doing, gathering sacrifices, kidnapping people from the surface, bringing them down to the goddess and sacrificing them to the goddess, something like that. Enslaving others so that they can appease the goddess later on. So they have these, slave pits where they collect all the surface dwellers that they've kidnapped, and then slowly feed the evil goddess, the man flesh she desires, and and go from there. That's my whole, half hour worth of, me spouting out how I would do a mega dungeon. So consider this, because you want to have your sanity intact by the end of all this, okay? Just making random rooms one at a time is not going to do it. You have to lay a foundation, an idea behind it, where the players are going to be able to intermix with some of these areas. Have a couple of spots in there where they, like maybe an underground city of some form, or you could have portals into other areas. Like at the end of Demon Web Pits, there was a couple of areas where you exit into a totally different world, but there's a city there and a bunch of other things. And sure, you can go there, do some trading and stuff, and then come back to the portal and again, whoop, back into the dungeon once again. Have stuff like that in there. But you got to have some areas where players can go ahead and, relieve themselves of the dredge and dreary underground experience in order to give themselves some retrospect on how they want to proceed, and with their riches and stuff like that. Maybe they discover a new area that they want to end up staying, which is what happened with us in the Demon Web Pits, is we ended up going to a different world and staying there for a long time. Lots of things can happen. You never know what's going to happen. It's entirely up to your players to do what they want to do. You just play the actors in this whole crazy scheme, and you keep tabs on who's winning. Knowles, the orc, maybe the harpies. Maybe the harpies raise up and they want to take over the caverns or something, or something like that. Who knows? You got to come up with ideas. You can have many different things happening in this ecosystem underground. That's my take. That's all I'm going to go on about, because, I'll just ramble on more. So if you think that this was something that you could use and you think I've earned your subscription, subscribe. Just do it. Just hit that button. It's free. You get all this free advice. I give you no nonsense. I give you good ideas. Just do it. Just do it, I tell you. Do it.